Congrats! Now you are a UPS cargo pilot. No more dealing with passengers, you don't need to smile, and you don't even have to close the cockpit door. You know, most people, when they think about pilots, right? They picture someone in a crisp uniform walking through a bright airport terminal, rolling suitcase behind them, maybe getting coffee at Starbucks before a flight, and say chat up with the ladies. But you're flying a bunch of packages to places and basically like a UPS delivery driver, but in the air with less frequent stops. In the cargo world. Specifically, and this is what we're getting into today, what it's actually like to be a UPS pilot. And I gotta say, it's fascinating, because on one hand, these pilots have some of the best jobs in aviation. I mean, we're talking top-tier pay, incredible benefits, job security that basically doesn't exist anywhere else in the industry. But on the other hand, and this is the kicker, they're living this completely inverted lifestyle that would honestly drive most people insane. So sit back in the jump seat or the couch in the back, and let's talk about what your life actually looks like when you're a UPS pilot. Where you actually work. The world of UPS hubs. First things first. Let's talk about where you're actually based as a UPS pilot, because this matters more than you might think. Unlike passenger airlines that have crew bases scattered all over the country, you know, hubs in every major city, UPS operates differently. They've got a few key domiciles, and where you're based determines pretty much everything about your life. The big one, the one everyone knows about, is SDF Louisville, Standiford Field, or as UPS calls it, Worldport. This is the mothership. This is where it all happens. If you're a UPS pilot, there's a pretty good chance you're based out of Louisville, at least at some point in your career. And Worldport is, it's insane. It's this massive facility, literally one of the largest automated package sorting facilities in the world. We're talking millions of square feet, conveyor belts stretching for miles, packages moving through at speeds that seem impossible. The whole operation runs like clockwork. Every night, sorting something like 400,000 packages per hour during peak season. It's honestly kind of mesmerizing if you ever get to see it from the inside. But Louisville isn't the only base. You've got Anchorage, ANC, which is huge for the Asia routes because of its geographic position. Anchorage sits right in the middle of the Great Circle route between the US and Asia, so a ton of trans-Pacific freight stops there. If you're flying 747s or MD-11s between the States and China, or Japan or Korea, you're probably routing through Anchorage. And let me tell you, spending layovers in Alaska in the winter it's something. Beautiful, sure, but also you're dealing with negative 20 degrees and limited daylight, which is its own kind of challenge when you're already fighting circadian rhythm issues. Then you've got some other bases scattered around. There's Newark, EWR, which handles a lot of the East Coast operations. Some pilots are based there, flying domestic routes or transatlantic stuff. You've got operations on the West Coast too. Ontario, California is a big one, and there's some flying out of other California airports. UPS also has international bases, though as a US-based pilot, you might not be permanently stationed there. Places like Cologne, Germany, or Hong Kong, or Dubai. These are strategic points in the global network where UPS needs a presence, and sometimes pilots are temporarily assigned there or they're staffed by local pilots. But here's the thing about being based somewhere. You're typically flying the same routes over and over, like consistently. If you're based in Louisville and you're on the 767, maybe you're flying Louisville to Philadelphia and back every night, or Louisville to Oakland, or Louisville to somewhere in the Midwest. You get into this pattern where you know the route, you know the airports, you know the procedures. It becomes almost automatic, which is good in some ways. You get really efficient at it, but it can also be monotonous. You're doing the same flight night after night, week after week. Some pilots love the predictability. Others find it mind-numbing. And if you're on international routes, say you're based in Anchorage or you're flying the Louisville to Cologne run, Same deal. You're doing that route repeatedly. You get to know the quirks of each airport, the controllers' voices, the best places to grab food on layover. It becomes your routine. Tight schedules and the domino effect. Now, here's something people don't really think about when it comes to cargo. Just because there aren't passengers on board doesn't mean there's no pressure to stay on schedule. In fact, in some ways, the pressure is even more intense because the entire UPS network is built on precision timing. Think about it. UPS's whole business model is next-day delivery. Someone in California ships a package at 5 p.m., and it needs to be in New York by 10:30 a.m. the next morning. That is not a lot of time. And for that to work, the whole system has to function like a Swiss watch. So your flight from, say, Oakland to Louisville has a very specific departure time. Not approximate. Not around 1 a.m. Like 1:07 a.m. because you need to arrive at Worldport at exactly the right time to feed into the sort. The sort is this massive, choreographed operation that happens in the middle of the night. Packages arrive from all over the country, get sorted, and then get loaded onto outbound flights that all depart within a narrow window. If your inbound flight is late, you throw off the whole thing. Packages miss their connections. Outbound flights get delayed. The ripple effect is huge. And weather? Oh man, weather delays can absolutely screw everything up. You're flying at night, which means you're dealing with weather that you can't always see coming the same way you would during the day. You've got thunderstorms popping up, icing conditions in the winter, fog at your destination. And if you have to hold or divert, that's a big deal. It's not like a passenger flight where, yeah, people are annoyed, but they'll get there eventually. Here, if you're an hour late, packages miss their delivery commitment. Customers are pissed. The company is pissed. There's financial penalties for missed delivery windows. So there's this constant pressure to get the flight out on time and get it there on time. And the thing is, you can't cut corners with safety. Like, obviously, but you feel the pressure? Dispatch is watching. The hub managers are watching. Everyone's aware that your flight being late has consequences downstream. One pilot I read about described it as flying a truck route, but in the air. You've got a schedule to keep, and deviating from it causes problems. It's not as relaxed as you might think just because there are no passengers complaining. The people you work with inside the UPS ecosystem. Alright, so let's talk about who you're actually interacting with as a UPS pilot, because it's not just you and your co-pilot in isolation. There's a whole ecosystem of people that make the operation work, and you get to know them pretty well. First, when you show up at the hub, let's say you're at Worldport in Louisville for the nightly sort, you're not walking through a passenger terminal. You're driving or getting dropped off at the cargo ramp. It's a different world back there. Big warehouses, tug vehicles hauling container trains, forklifts everywhere, the smell of jet fuel and cardboard, and you're checking in with various people before your flight. There's the shift manager or the ops manager who's overseeing the whole operation for the night. This is the person who's tracking which flights are on time, which ones are delayed, coordinating with maintenance if there's an aircraft issue, basically keeping the whole machine running. If there's a problem with your flight, maybe a maintenance delay, or a crew legality issue, or whatever, you're talking to them. They're problem solvers. They've usually been with UPS for years, and they know the operation inside and out. Then you've got the load masters. These are the people you interact with most directly, because they're responsible for loading your aircraft. And this is not a simple job. They've got to calculate weight and balance. Make sure the freight is distributed properly, so your center of gravity is correct. Secure everything so it doesn't shift in flight. A 747 freighter can carry over 100 tons of cargo, and if that load shifts during takeoff or landing, that's catastrophic. So the load masters take this seriously. You meet with them before the flight, they give you the load sheet, you verify the numbers, make sure everything looks good. If something seems off, like the weight distribution doesn't look right, you push back. It's a collaborative thing. Most load masters are great, super professional, they know what they're doing. But occasionally you get someone who's new or rushing, and you've got to slow them down and make sure it's done right. There's also the ramp crew, the people physically loading the containers and pallets into the aircraft. They're working in all kinds of weather, middle of the night, busting their asses to get everything loaded on time. You don't interact with them as directly, but you see them out there working, and there's a mutual respect. They're making it possible for you to do your job. At Worldport specifically, you might run into all kinds of other UPS people. Maintenance technicians if there's a mechanical issue. Dispatch and flight planning folks who routed your flight and filed your flight plan. Management types wandering around. Other pilots starting their trips or ending theirs. There's this whole community of people who work the night shift, and you start recognizing the same faces night after night. It becomes familiar. And then, when you land at your destination, let's say you're flying into Newark or Philadelphia or wherever, you're dealing with a similar but usually smaller operation. Not every airport has the same level of UPS infrastructure. At a smaller outstation, you might just have 1 or 2 UPS agents on duty. They're handling multiple flights, coordinating the freight transfers, dealing with any issues. You check in with them, make sure the unload goes smoothly, coordinate if there's any freight that needs special handling, like, I don't know, live animals or hazmat or something time sensitive. At some of these outstations, especially the smaller ones, you get to know the local UPS people really well because you're seeing them every time you fly that route. It's the same guys. You develop a rapport, they know your coffee order, you know their kids' names, whatever. It's kinda nice in a way. It makes the job feel less anonymous, even though you're just moving boxes, and occasionally you interact with people from other airlines too. If you're jump seating to or from work, you're dealing with gate agents and other carriers' crews. If you're at a shared cargo facility, you might see FedEx pilots or DHL crews or Atlas guys. There's usually a friendly nod, maybe some shop talk. How was your flight? Weather over the Rockies is garbage tonight. That kind of thing. It's a small community, really, once you're in it. But here's the thing. Even though you're interacting with all these people, the job is still fundamentally solitary. You're not chatting with passengers. You're not managing a cabin crew. Your social interactions are brief and transactional. Get the load sheet, confirm the numbers, launch. Most of your time is spent alone in the cockpit with your co-pilot flying through the night. So those brief human interactions at the hub or at outstations become kind of important. They're these little moments of connection in an otherwise isolated routine. What it's actually like inside when flying without the door. Okay, so now let's talk about what the actual flying experience is like, because this is where cargo really diverges from passenger operations in ways that are kind of fascinating. First off, and this is huge, there's literally no door between the cockpit and the cargo hold. I mean, there might be a door, but it's not locked, it's not hardened. It's not this fortress situation like on passenger planes. Because, well, who's gonna break in? The boxes? You've got maybe 3 people total on the airplane, 2 pilots, and sometimes a 3rd pilot if it's a long-haul flight that requires augmented crew. That's it. No flight attendants, no cabin crew, no passengers, just you, your co-pilot, and a whole lot of freight behind you. And this changes everything about the vibe of the flight. Like, on a passenger jet, there's this constant awareness that you're responsible for hundreds of people. There's formality. There are procedures for interacting with the cabin crew, making PAs, all that stuff. You're very much on for the entire flight. But in a cargo plane? Man, it's different. Once you've done your pre-flight, talked to the loadmaster, closed up the airplane, and pushed back, it's just you and your buddy in the cockpit, that's it. The atmosphere can be way more relaxed. I mean, you're still professional, you're still flying the airplane safely, but there's less of that passenger airline polish. Some pilots joke that they fly in their comfortable clothes when they can get away with it, though obviously you've got your uniform on when it matters. But like, on a deadhead or on certain flights, The dress code gets more relaxed. You're not worried about passengers seeing you. You're not worried about maintaining this perfect airline image. You're just flying freight, bringing your own everything. And here's another thing that's kind of hilarious and also kind of depressing. You bring your own food, like all of it. There's no catering service loading meal carts before your flight. There's no flight attendant heating up your crew meal and bringing it to you on a tray with a little dessert and a roll. Nope. You pack your own lunch, or I guess dinner since you're flying at night, and you bring it with you. So before your trip, you're hitting the grocery store, buying stuff that travels well. Sandwiches, granola bars, whatever. Some pilots get really into meal prep, making elaborate lunches for their whole trip. Others just grab whatever's quick and easy. But either way, it's on you. And there's usually a coffee maker on the airplane. Usually, sometimes, hopefully. The galley on a cargo plane is pretty minimal. It's not like a passenger aircraft where there's a full galley setup with ovens and tons of storage. You might have a small area with a coffee maker, maybe a little oven for heating stuff up, some limited storage, and you're just praying that coffee maker works, because if it doesn't, you're in for a long night. Like a really long night. You're flying all night, you're exhausted, and coffee is basically your lifeline. If that machine decides to die on you mid-trip, well, you're screwed. You're stopping at every vending machine you can find on layovers, hoarding those little instant coffee packets from hotel rooms, whatever it takes. One pilot described the galley situation as hoping the coffee machine is working and the oven doesn't smell like whatever the last crew burned in there, which is extremely accurate. You're heating up your sad little microwavable meal in an oven that maybe hasn't been properly cleaned in a while, and it smells vaguely of someone else's burnt popcorn or whatever from 3 weeks ago. Glamorous, right? And because there's no catering service restocking things between flights, if supplies run low, like coffee or cups or even just napkins, you're kind of on your own. Some pilots stash their own supplies in the cockpit. You've got your personal stash of coffee, sugar, creamer, whatever you need to survive the night. It's like you're packing for a camping trip, except your campsite is at 35,000 feet. The freedom of no passengers. But here's the thing. That lack of structure, that DIY aspect of it, it also gives you a weird kind of freedom. You're not worried about passenger comfort. You're not adjusting cabin temperature because someone in 23B is cold. You're not making PA announcements every 10 minutes. You're not dealing with call buttons or meal service timing or any of that. You just fly the airplane. That's your only job. Fly it safely from point A to point B. And in the cockpit, the atmosphere can be pretty chill when workload allows. Like during cruise, when everything's stable and you're just monitoring systems, you and your co-pilot can actually talk about whatever. Sports, family, politics, life, aviation stuff, random philosophical debates at 2 a.m. There's no one listening in. No passengers who might overhear something and complain. No cabin crew popping in asking questions. It's just you two. Some cargo pilots talk about how on long overnight flights over the ocean, they'll dim the cockpit lights way down, just enough to see the instruments and just watch the stars. Or if you're lucky and you're far enough north, you watch the aurora borealis dance across the sky. One pilot described it as almost meditative. You're up there in the dark, engines humming, the whole world asleep below you, and it's just peaceful. And the thing is, you don't have to maintain this perfect professional demeanor the entire time. Like, if you're tired, you're tired. You can say, "Man, I'm exhausted," and your co-pilot gets it because they're tired too. You can complain about the schedule, joke about whatever, be human. You don't have to put on the polished airline persona. There's also less pressure about the little things. Like, if you spill coffee on your shirt, who cares? There's no one to see it except your co-pilot, and they're not gonna judge you. If you want to take your shoes off during cruise because your feet hurt, go for it. You're not worried about passengers walking by and seeing you looking less than perfect. If you want to eat your sad sandwich directly out of the plastic bag instead of using a plate like a civilized person, that's fine too. No one's watching. One cargo pilot put it like this: "We don't have to be perfectly neat like on a passenger flight. We're just here to move freight. As long as the airplane gets there safely and on time, nobody cares if my uniform shirt is a little wrinkled or if there are crumbs on the center console." The dark side of freedom. But okay, there's also a downside to all this. The lack of structure can be kind of depressing sometimes. Like, when you're on a passenger flight, there's this sense of, importance. You're responsible for people, you're part of this larger operation with cabin crew and gate agents, and everyone's working together to get these passengers where they need to go. There's a sense of purpose beyond just flying the airplane, but when it's just you and boxes, sometimes it feels a bit hollow. You're essentially a truck driver who happens to be in the sky. You're moving stuff. That's it. And at 3 a.m., when you're exhausted and you've been flying the same route for the 100th time and you're eating a cold sandwich you packed yourself and the coffee tastes like burnt sadness, it can feel pretty lonely. There's no one to thank you. No passenger who catches you on the way out and says, "Great flight, Captain." No round of applause when you make a smooth landing. Just you and your co-pilot parking the jet at some cargo ramp, doing your paperwork, and heading to a hotel to sleep during the day while the rest of the world is awake. And the fact that you're responsible for bringing your own food, dealing with a sketchy coffee maker, and basically being self-sufficient in a lot of ways. It's not hard exactly, but it does reinforce that sense of, you're on your own out here. There's no support system, no catering team making sure you're taken care of, no flight attendants to help with anything. It's just you. Some pilots love that independence. Others find it isolating. It really depends on your personality. But either way, it's a huge departure from the passenger airline experience. Just you and the machine. And I think that's what defines cargo flying, really. It's just you and the machine and the job. Everything else is stripped away. There's no pretense, no glamour, no customer service element. You're a professional pilot operating a multi-million-dollar aircraft, but you're doing it in this very blue-collar utilitarian way. You show up with your packed lunch in a cooler. You check the weight and balance with the loadmaster. You pre-flight the airplane, which, by the way, you're often doing yourself without ground crew helping as much as they would on a passenger flight. You climb in the cockpit with your co-pilot, you fire up the engines, you fly through the night while everyone else is asleep. You land. You go to the hotel. You do it again tomorrow night. There's something kind of pure about that in a way. Like, you're really just focused on the flying. The aviation, not all the other stuff that comes with passenger operations. But it can also feel kind of lonely and unglamorous, especially when you're eating a soggy sandwich at 2 a.m. and the coffee maker's broken, and you're so tired you can barely see straight. But hey, at least you don't have to deal with passengers, right? No one's calling you because their TV screen isn't working. No one's complaining that there's no vegan meal option. No one's asking if they can move to first class for free. Just you, your co-pilot, and a whole lot of boxes that don't care if your shirt is wrinkled or if you're having a bad night. And honestly, for a lot of cargo pilots, that trade-off is absolutely worth it. The schedule that breaks your brain. Okay, so now let's get into the real meat of this, the schedule. Because when you work for UPS as a pilot, you need to just accept that your relationship with time is going to fundamentally change, like permanently. And here's the thing, and this is probably the single biggest factor in everything else we're going to talk about. Most of your flying happens at night. Not some of it, not occasionally. Like 60 to 80% of all your flights are overnight. And when I say overnight, I don't mean you take off at like 9 p.m. and land at midnight. I mean you're starting your workday at 11 p.m. 11 p.m., you know, that time when normal humans are either already asleep or getting ready for bed. That's when your workday begins. As one UPS pilot put it, and I love this quote because it's so matter of fact, most trips start around 11 p.m. That's how they can get stuff to you next day. Right? Because it makes total sense from a logistics perspective. UPS needs to pick up packages all day, sort them at their hub, that massive WorldPort facility we just talked about, and then they need to fly those packages out overnight so they can arrive at their destination the next morning. Next day delivery. That's the whole business model. But for you, the pilot, you're essentially becoming nocturnal, and not just on work nights, because you can't just flip back and forth between being a day person and a night person. Your body doesn't work like that. Or, it tries to, but it fights you every step of the way. One cargo loadmaster, so not even a pilot, just someone else working the same overnight schedule, described it like this: "It seriously messes with your body clock. My worst stretch of night shift, I lost the ability to sleep at night. Would only get tired around 7 to 8 a.m. Like, think about that. His circadian rhythm got so scrambled that he literally couldn't sleep at night anymore. His body just rejected it. He'd only feel tired when the sun was coming up. And there's actually this saying among cargo pilots, kind of a dark joke, but it's one of those jokes that has some truth buried in it, that flying at night for your entire career will shorten your life by like 7 years or something. 7 years. Now, is that scientifically proven? Probably not in any rigorous way. But the fact that pilots are saying it, that it's become this accepted piece of folk wisdom, tells you something about how they perceive the toll this lifestyle takes. There are even stories, anecdotal sure, but still, of cargo pilots being medically grounded because of what those weird hours did to them over time. The monthly schedule lottery. Okay, so let's get into the actual mechanics of how your schedule works at UPS, because it's not like a normal job where you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, weekends off. Not even close. Your year gets divided into 13 blocks. Each block is 28 days, and in each of those 28-day blocks, you typically work about 14 days and have about 14 days off. Which on paper sounds pretty great, right? Like half the month on, half the month off. Not bad. Except, and this is where it gets messy, those 14 work days aren't consecutive. Well, sometimes they are, but usually they're not. And that's the problem. See, UPS uses this scheduling software that pilots lovingly refer to as the optimizer. And what it does is, it optimizes. But not for your convenience. It optimizes for the company's operational needs. So instead of getting a nice tidy pattern like work 7 days, off 7 days, work 7 days, off 7 days, you might get something absolutely bonkers. Like you work a 10-day trip, then you're home for 3 days, then you work a 3-day trip, home for 2 days, then you work a random 2-day trip. And it's just scattered throughout the month in this way that makes it really hard to establish any kind of routine. One UPS 747 pilot described this, and I love this because you can just hear the exhaustion in his words. He said it's rare to get 2 7-day trips in a month. Instead, you might work a 10-day, a 3-day, and a 2-day at random intervals across 28 days. And here's the real kicker. He recalled one particularly brutal stretch where he had 11 starts across 56 days. 11 starts. That means he had to commute from his home to his base. We'll get to commuting in a second, but trust me, it's its own special hell. 11 separate times in just 2 months. He said it really sucked, which feels like maybe an understatement, because every time you have a new trip start, that's another disruption. You're leaving home again. You're adjusting your sleep again. You're packing your cooler with food again. It's not like you get into a groove. It's constant starting and stopping. Living where you work or don't. And speaking of commuting, oh man, we gotta talk about commuting. Because UPS doesn't have crew bases scattered all over the country like some passenger airlines do. They've got their main hub at WorldPort in Louisville. And then they've got a few satellite bases, some operations in Anchorage, some stuff on the West Coast, a few other spots, but not many, which means there's a really good chance you don't live in Louisville. And honestly, unless you really love Louisville, which is a fine city, I'm not knocking it, but unless you're really attached to Louisville specifically, you probably don't want to move there just for this job. You've got your life wherever you are. Your family's established, kids in school, maybe your spouse has a job they don't want to leave, whatever. So what do? You commute. And by commute, I don't mean like a 45-minute drive. I mean you live in, say, Denver or Seattle or Dallas, and on the day before your trip starts, you've got to catch a flight, either jump seating on another carrier or buying a ticket to get yourself to Louisville. Then you work your trip for however many days. Then, at the end, you catch another flight back home. And here's the thing. A majority of UPS pilots do this. One forum poster said, straight up, a majority of UPS pilots choose to commute. So it's not like you're an outlier if you're commuting. It's actually the norm. But it's exhausting. Because now your work trip doesn't just include the actual flying. It includes the travel to and from work. And if there's weather, or if flights are delayed, or if the jump seat is full and you can't get on, well, now you're stressing about even making it to work on time. And if you're late, that's on you. That's your problem. So pilots will do anything they can to minimize the number of commutes per month. They'll bid for longer trips, like give me one long 14-day stretch instead of 3 shorter trips, because that way I only have to commute twice in the month instead of 6 times. As one pilot put it, bidding for longer trips with fewer commutes are the usual first choice for commuters, which makes total sense. And if you can't commute or you don't want to, your only other option is to actually move to your base, live in domicile, and that's a huge life decision. We're talking about uprooting your entire existence so that you can drive 20 minutes to the airport instead of flying across the country. But the pilots who do it will tell you it makes a massive difference. One pilot said, living in domicile or having a short, reliable commute is a very important part of quality of life. Like, it's not optional if you want to maintain your sanity. It's essential. What your trip actually looks like. Alright, so you've commuted to Louisville, or maybe you drove from your house if you're lucky enough to live in domicile. Either way, you're starting your trip. What does the actual flying look like? Well, here's the thing about UPS flying. There's actually a huge range depending on what kind of routes you're working. At one extreme, you've got what they call out and back trips, or just turns. These are day trips. Well, night trips technically, but same day trips. You take off from Louisville, fly to wherever, unload, reload, fly back, and you're home that same, day is the wrong word. Same night cycle? You know what I mean. You're back at home base within your duty period, and these trips are amazing if you can hold them, because you're literally sleeping in your own bed every off-duty period. But here's the catch. They go very senior, as they say. Meaning, you need to have been at UPS for a long time to have the seniority to bid for those trips. Junior pilots? You're not getting anywhere near those trips for years. More commonly, especially if you're not super senior, you're working what they call a rotation. And this might be, so for domestic flying, a typical pattern is you fly into the Louisville hub for the nightly sort, which happens in the middle of the night, obviously, and then you fly back out early morning to some other city. Then you rest there during the day, and that night you do it again. Fly into Louisville for the sort, back out after, and you do this for like 5 days, maybe 7 days, something like that. Then you're done and you go home. For international routes, it's a different beast entirely. Long-haul international trips, we're talking flying to Europe or Asia or wherever, these trips often last like 14 days or more. You're away from home for 2 full weeks, just bouncing around the globe. But here's the trade-off. You work those 14 days, and then you're off for the rest of the month. Like, actually off. Not working at all. Just home. And those international trips, they go senior too. Because yeah, you're away for 2 weeks straight, which is tough. But then you've got 2 weeks or more completely off. And if you're the kind of person who can handle being away for long stretches, that's actually a pretty sweet deal. You're basically compressing your work into half the month or less. But if you're junior, you're probably not getting those trips either. You're getting the scraps. The random 3-day trips with quick turns and minimal rest. And that's where the fatigue really starts to pile up. The fatigue is real. Like really real. Speaking of fatigue, oh man, we need to talk about this because it's probably the most serious issue with this entire lifestyle. The fatigue is not a joke. See, here's what happens. You're flying all night. Your body wants to be asleep, but you're in a cockpit, you're landing airplanes, you're making decisions. Then you land at like 5 or 6 a.m. and you go to a hotel. And now you're supposed to sleep during the day, while the sun is up, while there's construction noise outside or people talking in the hallway or whatever. And maybe you can sleep or maybe you can't, but either way it's not the same quality of sleep you'd get at night in a dark, quiet room. And then you do it again the next night, and the night after that, and by day 5 or day 7 of this pattern, you're just wrecked. One FedEx pilot, and I know we're supposed to be talking about UPS, but the lifestyle is basically the same across the big cargo carriers. This pilot said that before some recent scheduling changes, they used to at least get longer layovers where you could actually adjust your body clock a bit. But now, those days are mostly gone. Now you're flipping your day-night schedule every 36 hours sometimes. And he said after a 5-day or 7-day trip of that, it starts to feel pretty rough. Which again, understatement of the year probably. Your body just isn't designed to function like this. Humans are diurnal creatures. We're supposed to sleep when it's dark and be awake when it's light. And when you force your body to do the opposite, and not just occasionally, but as your permanent lifestyle, things start to break down. There was actually an NTSB report about a FedEx crew that landed on the wrong runway after an all-night flight, and the report found they were likely fatigued from chronic sleep loss. Like, this isn't just, oh, I'm tired, this is, my brain is not functioning at full capacity and I'm making errors. And one Reddit user put it really well. They said, a lot of weird things can start to happen once you start messing with your body's circadian rhythm and not getting on a set sleep schedule. Weird things, like your cognitive function declines, your reaction time slows. You might start feeling depressed or anxious, though we'll get to mental health in a bit. You're more susceptible to getting sick because your immune system is compromised. It's a whole cascade of problems. And then there's this slightly terrifying anecdote from a cargo loadmaster who said during his worst stretch of night shifts, he lost the ability to sleep at night. Like, even on his days off, he couldn't fall asleep at a normal hour. His body had been so thoroughly conditioned to be awake at night that it just stayed that way. He'd only get tired around 7 or 8 a.m., which is when he should be waking up. That's how thoroughly scrambled his circadian rhythm got. The night flying is beautiful, but extremely lonely. But okay, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, it kind of is. But there are some unique aspects of night flying that cargo pilots will tell you they actually love. For one thing, and this is weirdly poetic, the sky at night is just stunning. 1767 cargo captain described flying across the Atlantic in the middle of the night, and he said once they enter Atlantic airspace, it drops to a much gentler pace. Food goes into the oven, headsets go off, and if we're lucky, we get to watch a display of the aurora. The Northern Lights, just dancing across the sky above them while they cruise at 35,000 feet over the ocean. He said, sometimes it feels like we're the only aircraft going this way. And there's something kind of magical about that, right? Like, the radios are quiet because there's not much traffic at 2 a.m. The cockpit lights are dimmed. It's just you and your co-pilot and the hum of the engines and this incredible natural light show happening outside. Maybe you've got your sad sandwich you packed. Maybe the coffee maker actually worked this time, and you're just existing up there in the darkness. It's peaceful in a way that daytime flying in crowded airspace never is. But it's also lonely, because you're awake when everyone else is asleep. You're working when your friends and family are in bed, and even when you're on layover in some city, it's not like you can really go explore. You land at 5 a.m., you're exhausted, and even if you wanted to go see the sights, everything's closed. You're sleeping during the day, and by the time you wake up, it's time to head back to the airport for your next flight. One pilot said that if he doesn't start when it's dark, he'll be finishing when it's dark. A lot of times it's sunset to sunrise, which means weeks or months of barely seeing the sun. And I mean, that's not just a logistical inconvenience, that affects your mental health. Humans need sunlight. We need vitamin D, we need that circadian cue. And when you're not getting it, things start to feel off. The weekend's off thing, which is actually pretty great. Okay, but here's one major perk that UPS pilots have that most passenger airline pilots don't. Weekends off. Like actual weekends. Saturday and Sunday, at home. And this is because of how UPS's domestic network operates. They fly mostly Monday through Friday nights, because that's when the business shipping happens. Businesses aren't sending packages over the weekend, or at least, not nearly as many. So UPS's US operations basically shut down on weekends. One pilot confirmed this. For UPS domestic operations, flying occurs during the weekdays only, leaving most weekends off for the pilots. And if you're flying domestic routes, this is huge, because passenger airline pilots, they're working weekends, they're working holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Those are busy days for passenger airlines, so pilots are working. But if you're a UPS pilot on a domestic route, you're probably home for those weekends. You can actually plan stuff with your family. You can go to your kid's soccer game on Saturday. You can have Sunday brunch. You can, exist in normal society for 2 days a week. Now, granted, if you're flying international routes, this doesn't really apply. Those flights operate 7 days a week because global logistics doesn't stop for weekends. But still, for domestic guys, having weekends off is a pretty massive quality of life thing that shouldn't be underestimated. And when you think about it, you're packing your own meals, dealing with a questionable coffee maker, flying through the night while exhausted, but at least you get to be home on weekends when everyone else is awake and doing normal human things. It's a trade-off, right? The job is weird and hard and isolating during the week, but you get these regular touch points with normal life that a lot of passenger airline pilots don't get. The seniority game, like everything, depends on your number. We keep mentioning seniority, so let's actually dig into this because it's absolutely crucial to understanding life at UPS, or really at any airline, but especially here. Everything, and I mean everything, is determined by your seniority number. How long you've been at the company relative to everyone else. That number determines what aircraft you fly, what routes you fly, what base you're assigned to, whether you're a captain or first officer, what your monthly schedule looks like, how much time off you can get, basically every single aspect of your quality of life. One UPS pilot said it perfectly. Seniority rules your quality of line and quality of life. So if you're senior, meaning you've been there for a long time, you can bid for the good stuff. Those out and back day trips we talked about, senior pilots get those. Nice schedules with longer layovers and better rest, senior pilots. Flying the aircraft you actually want to fly? Gotta be senior. Getting the domicile you want so you don't have to commute? Senior. But if you're junior, meaning you just got hired, you're getting whatever's left over. And what's left over is usually the worst stuff. Red-eye hub turns with minimal rest. Reserve duty where you're on call and might get assigned a trip with 2 hours notice. random schedules that are impossible to plan around, and you're stuck packing your own crappy meals and hoping the coffee maker works on whichever old airplane you get assigned to. Junior pilots eat the scraps until they build enough seniority to bid for something better. And building that seniority takes time, years, sometimes decades, depending on how fast the company is growing and how many senior pilots are retiring. But here's something interesting that's happening right now. Well, in the next 10 years or so, UPS has an aging pilot group, like really aging. Get this, 53.6% of UPS pilots will retire in the next 10 years. More than half, and about 23.5% will retire in just the next 5 years. You know what that means? Movement, upgrades, junior pilots moving up. Because when all those senior guys retire, their captain seats open up. Their nice schedules become available. The whole seniority list shifts upward. So if you're a new hire at UPS right now, you're actually in a pretty good position long term. Yeah, your first few years are going to be rough. You're going to be junior, you're going to get the bad schedules, you're going to be eating your packed sandwiches alone in a dark cockpit at 3 a.m., wondering what you're doing with your life. It's going to suck. But you're also going to move up faster than new hires did 10 or 15 years ago, when retirements were fewer and farther between. FedEx is in a similar boat, by the way. About 40% of their pilot group is retiring in the next decade. So, across the big cargo carriers, there's this massive demographic wave coming that's going to reshape everything. So, what you actually fly. So what airplanes are you flying at, UPS? Because it matters. Different aircraft have different characteristics, different routes, different crew positions available, and honestly, different quality of life in the cockpit. Some planes have better galleys, better coffee makers, better everything. UPS operates Boeing 747-8F, the big one, the queen of the skies. Boeing 767, a really common wide-body twin. Boeing 757, narrow body, mostly domestic. Airbus A300, older wide-body, being phased out. MD-11, the trijet, also being phased out. If you're a new hire, you're probably starting on the 757 or 767 as a first officer, and you might stay on that aircraft for years, depending on how fast things move. Eventually, maybe you upgrade to captain on that same type, or maybe you bid over to a different aircraft as a first officer if there's an opening. It all depends on vacancies and your seniority. The 747-8F is the crown jewel, and senior guys love it. It's the biggest, it pays the most, and it's a 747. It's iconic, but it also flies the longest routes. International stuff, often trans-Pacific, so you're gone for 2 weeks at a time, and you're bringing 2 weeks worth of food with you, or at least supplementing what you can find on layovers. Some guys love that. Some guys hate it. The 767 is kind of the workhorse. It does international and domestic routes, it's modern and reliable, and a lot of pilots end up spending most of their career on it. The galley is decent, the coffee maker usually works, the cockpit is comfortable. It's a solid airplane. The 757 is more domestic focused, shorter trips, but also it's a narrow body so it can go into smaller airports. The cockpit is a bit more cramped, but for shorter flights it's fine. And then the older jets, the MD-11 and A300, are slowly being retired. Some pilots love the MD-11 because it's challenging to fly and has personality. Others can't wait to get off it because it's old and quirky and doesn't have the modern systems the 767 or 747-8 have. And the coffee maker probably hasn't been replaced since 1995. There's actually this funny dynamic where some pilots will bid for a specific aircraft not because of the routes or the pay, but just because they love the plane. Like, they want to fly the 747 before it's gone, so they'll take a worse schedule just to get on that type. It's a plane nerd thing, but it's real. Now, let's talk money. Okay, so we've talked about all the downsides, the fatigue, the weird schedules, the commuting, packing your own sad meals, praying the coffee maker works, the isolation. But let's talk about the upside, because there is one and it's significant: the money. UPS pilots are among the highest paid pilots in the world, like in the entire world. In 2023, UPS's pilot union, the Independent Pilots Association, negotiated a new contract that is absolutely bonkers. We're talking top of industry pay rates. A senior wide-body captain at UPS can make well over $400,000 a year, maybe pushing $450,000 or more with overtime and premium pay. Even as a first officer, once you've got some seniority, you're clearing $200,000 pretty easily. And it's not just the base pay. There's also profit sharing, retirement contributions. UPS has a pension plan plus a 401k, great health insurance, and other benefits. One pilot on Indeed literally wrote, "Fantastic people, great equipment, top of industry pay." And they meant it. Compare that to regional airline pilots who might be making $50,000 or $60,000 their first year. And you can see why UPS is considered an endgame job. You get here, you stay here. There's really nowhere better to go pay-wise. Sure, you're packing your own lunch and flying through the night alone, but you're making enough money that you could buy a really nice lunch if you wanted to. You just can't, because everything's closed at 2 a.m. and you're in the middle of the Atlantic. Now, there was a period recently, like 2022 to 2023, where some FedEx pilots were actually leaving to go to passenger airlines, which was unheard of. Historically, you didn't leave FedEx or UPS. Those were destination jobs. But a bunch of FedEx pilots got frustrated with stagnant pay and left for Delta or United, where new contracts were even better. That sent shockwaves through the cargo world. Like, wait, people are actually quitting FedEx? But UPS avoided that problem by getting ahead of it with their 2023 contract. They made sure their pilots remained the best compensated, so there wasn't the same exodus. The retirement pensions and time off. And speaking of long-term benefits, let's talk about retirement, because this is another area where UPS shines. UPS still has a defined benefit pension plan, which is insanely rare these days. Most companies, airlines included, got rid of pensions years ago and switched to just 401k plans, but UPS kept theirs. So when you retire, you're getting a monthly pension check for the rest of your life. That's huge. That's financial security in retirement that most workers in America just don't have anymore. Plus, they've got the 401k with company matching, so you're building wealth on both fronts. But here's the other thing about quality of life at UPS that's kind of mind-blowing: the amount of time off you can engineer if you're smart about it. Remember how we said you typically work 14 days a month? Well, you've also got vacation time, and UPS has this system called OCV, which is like a vacation bank. And if you bid your schedule cleverly, you can stack your vacation days with your regular days off in a way that gives you enormous chunks of time off. One UPS pilot described how, with clever bidding, you can manage 6, 7, even 8 weeks off straight with a 2-week vacation. Like 2 months off in a row. And over the course of a year, at maximum seniority with creative bidding, some pilots are taking up to 5 or so months off a year. 5 months. That's almost half the year. Now, granted, that's at the very top of the seniority list, and you're using all your vacation time to do it, but still. The fact that it's even possible is wild. And this is the trade-off, right? Yeah, when you're working, you're flying all night and dealing with fatigue and being away from home and packing your own meals like you're going on a camping trip and it's hard. But when you're off, you're really off. You're not checking emails, you're not on call, you're just home for weeks or months at a time if you plan it right. And you can actually afford to take your family on nice vacations because you're making $400,000 a year. A lot of UPS pilots will tell you this is what makes the job worth it. The schedule is brutal when you're on, but the time off is incredible. And for some people, especially people who value long chunks of free time, Maybe they want to travel for a month, or spend extended time with family, or just decompress from all those nights of eating packed sandwiches alone. That's the perfect trade-off. No passengers, no problem. All right, let's talk about what might be the single most cited benefit of cargo flying. No passengers, no people in the back, no customer service, no one to deal with except your co-pilot and maybe some ground crew. And for a lot of pilots, this is the dream. One pilot put it bluntly: no passengers or flight attendants. This is always the first point cargo pilots make. Think about what passenger airline pilots deal with. They've got a cabin full of people who might be angry about delays, or scared of turbulence, or asking for special meals, or getting into arguments with each other, or being drunk and disorderly, or having medical emergencies. The pilots have to make PA announcements, deal with the flight attendants' concerns, coordinate with gate agents, handle customer complaints. It's a whole thing. Cargo pilots, they show up, they check the weight and balance with the load masters. They fly the plane, they land, they go to the hotel. That's it. No one's complaining about leg room. No one's asking for extra peanuts. No babies crying. No drunk guy yelling at the back. Just boxes. As one MD-11 captain put it, we're all happier not having 300 people in the back. No crying babies, no drunk idiots. Just us and our freight. And imagine you have to divert for weather. On a passenger flight, that's a disaster. You've got to arrange hotels for everyone, meal vouchers, rebook connections, deal with angry travelers. People are tweeting about how terrible your airline is. It's a PR nightmare. On a cargo flight, you land, you secure the load, you wait it out. That's it. Boxes don't complain. They don't need hotels. They just sit there patiently until you can deliver them. Way less stress. One pilot joked that during irregular operations, no hotel or meal vouchers to hand out when we divert. We just secure the load and wait it out. The simplicity is beautiful. The cargo flying culture, there's also a cultural difference. Cargo flying is more, utilitarian. It's blue collar in a way that passenger flying tries not to be. Passenger airlines are all about the customer experience, the brand, the image. You're wearing a perfect uniform, you're smiling, you're representing the company. Cargo, you're just there to move freight. Get it from A to B safely and on time. That's the mission. There's less pressure about optics because no customers are watching. In fact, cargo pilots can sometimes be more relaxed about certain things. Like, the dress code might be looser when you're deadheading or on a positioning flight. Some pilots joke about flying in comfortable clothes when they can get away with it. Obviously, when you're in the cockpit flying, you're in uniform, you're professional. But the overall vibe is just different. And the people you're working with, your fellow pilots, the ground crew, the mechanics, everyone's just there to get the job done. There's less of the corporate airline culture, more of a we're all in the trenches together mentality. One UPS pilot summed up the company culture with UPS's mantra: people, service, profit. And he said, you can actually feel that they treat employees well. It's not just a slogan. The company invests in its people because they know that's what makes the operation work. The downside: no family flight benefits. But okay, there's one big downside to flying cargo instead of passengers. No flight benefits for your family. See, if you work for Delta or United or American, you and your family get free or heavily discounted standby travel on your airline. Your spouse, your kids, they can all fly for basically nothing. It's one of the most valuable perks in the passenger airline industry. You can go on vacation for the cost of maybe a small fee in taxes. Your kids can visit colleges all over the country without paying for flights. It's huge. But UPS doesn't fly passengers, so no flight benefits, at least not in the traditional sense. Your family wants to go somewhere? You're buying tickets like anyone else. Now, there are some workarounds. UPS pilots have this interesting system where if the company needs to reposition them for a flight, like deadhead them to another city, the company will buy an airline ticket. But if the pilot jumps seats instead, like rides in the cockpit of another carrier for free, they can bank the value of that unused ticket into a personal travel fund called a deviation bank. Over time, you accumulate these credits, and then you can use that money to buy airline tickets for yourself or your family. Plus, you keep the frequent flyer miles from those tickets. So senior international pilots who are constantly deadheading can rack up a ton of travel funds and end up being top-tier elite members of airline frequent flyer programs. One pilot explained it like this: most 777 and MD-11 pilots are top-tier members of airline alliances because they can spend saved money and also get to keep all the miles. So it's not nothing, but it's not the same as unlimited free flights for your whole family either. One pilot put it plainly: the thing that is bad about flying freight is no family flight benefits, but that's small compared to the stability and good pay. Which is fair. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to fly your kids to Disney World for free, but also, you're making $400,000 a year and have job security, so you can afford to buy the tickets. Family life, making it work or not. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. How do you have a family with this lifestyle? Because it's not easy. Like, at all. You're gone for days or weeks at a time. When you're home, you might be sleeping during the day while your family is awake. You miss birthdays. You miss school events. You miss the day-to-day stuff that makes up family life. One pilot said bluntly that the lifestyle is shit for mental health, and you can't really start a family depending on the routes you have to fly. Now that's probably overly pessimistic. Plenty of cargo pilots have families, but it requires work, and most importantly, it requires an incredibly understanding and independent spouse. In practical terms, when you're on a trip, your spouse is functioning as a single parent. One forum user described it like this: those 3 to 5 days that he is away, his wife will be a single mom. And that's just reality. Your partner is handling everything, kids, household, all of it, without you. So you need a spouse who is okay with that, who doesn't resent you for being gone, who can handle the responsibility. And that's a big ask. One longtime cargo pilot said, "My wife is amazing. You can have a great aviation career and a family. Just make good choices," but notice he leads with, "My wife is amazing." That's not an accident. He's acknowledging that his family situation works because his wife makes it work. The flip side is that when you are home, you're really home. You're not distracted by work. You're not checking emails. You can be fully present in a way that people with traditional 9-to-5 jobs sometimes aren't. And if you're off for 2 weeks straight, that's 2 full weeks of family time. You can take your kids on a long trip. You can be at every dinner. You can coach their sports team. So it's a different rhythm. It's compressed, intense periods away, intense periods home. Some families thrive on that, others struggle. And honestly, a lot depends on timing. If you're trying to start a family with young kids while you're a junior pilot with a terrible schedule, that's really hard. But if you've got seniority and can hold a decent schedule, or if your kids are older and more independent, it's more manageable. Mental health, the thing that no one talks about. And then there's mental health, which is something the aviation industry as a whole is slowly starting to acknowledge. Pilots face strict medical certification requirements, and for a long time that created this culture where you couldn't admit to having any mental health struggles, because if you did, you might lose your medical certificate, and losing your medical means losing your job. So pilots just didn't talk about it. They dealt with depression or anxiety in silence. They self-medicated with alcohol. They pushed through. And sometimes, tragically, things ended badly. One pilot noted that strict rules on medical certification, stuff like depression, can be a career ender, lead many to hide their struggles, and the cargo pilot lifestyle specifically can exacerbate mental health issues. You're isolated. You're away from your support system. You're exhausted from the fatigue. You're working alone in a cockpit at 3 a.m. It's a recipe for loneliness and depression. An industry survey of pilots found that over half reported feelings of depression or anxiety at some point. Over half! And that's probably underreported because of the stigma. The good news is the culture is slowly changing. The FAA has updated some of its policies to be more accommodating. There are peer support programs, but there's still a long way to go. And for cargo pilots specifically, the isolation is real. You don't have a cabin full of flight attendants to chat with. You're not interacting with passengers. You're often in far-flung places on layover where you don't know anyone. It can be lonely. So mental health is something that needs to be taken seriously. And if you're considering this career, you need to be honest with yourself about whether you can handle that aspect of it. The weird stuff you're gonna run into. Okay, let's lighten things up a bit and talk about some of the weird, unusual stuff that cargo pilots deal with that passenger pilots never see. First, the cargo itself. You're not just hauling packages. Sometimes you're carrying live animals, racehorses, zoo animals, laboratory animals. And these animals have handlers who fly with them. So you actually do have someone in the back. But they're there to take care of the animals, not as passengers. And animals can be challenging. There are stories of a lion roaring in its crate throughout a flight, exotic birds making noise. And here's my favorite. One crew had to divert because some laboratory monkeys they were transporting escaped from their enclosure mid-flight. Imagine declaring an emergency to ATC? Yeah, we've got loose monkeys in the cockpit. That's apparently a true story and has become legendary among cargo pilots. There's also this anecdote about transporting a $100 million racehorse on a 747 freighter. The horse had its own groom on board, and pilots joked it was probably the only passenger whose insurance value exceeded the airplane's. But it's not all fun and games. Cargo pilots also carry hazardous materials that passenger airlines won't touch. Radioactive isotopes, lithium batteries in bulk, dry ice, even military munitions sometimes. And that brings real risk. The most tragic example is UPS Flight 6 in 2010, which crashed in Dubai, killing both pilots. The cause was a fire from lithium batteries in the cargo hold. The pilots fought that fire for as long as they could, trying to make it back to the airport, but they were overcome by smoke and the plane crashed. That kind of thing, a cargo fire, is a cargo pilot's worst nightmare. There are no flight attendants to fight a fire in the cabin. It's just you and your co-pilot. You've got smoke hoods, fire extinguishers, fire suppression systems, but if something goes really wrong, you're on your own. One FedEx pilot pointed out that we have to fly at night while carrying hazardous cargo passenger airlines wouldn't carry. And yet until recently, they weren't paid extra for that additional risk, which is kinda crazy when you think about it. Thankfully, incidents like UPS 6 are extremely rare, but they're a reminder that cargo flying has its own unique dangers that the public never really thinks about. The most insane story, FedEx Flight 705. And then there's FedEx Flight 705, which is probably the most insane story in cargo aviation history. In 1994, a FedEx employee, a pilot who was deadheading on the flight, attempted to hijack a DC-10 freighter. His plan was to crash the plane as a suicide mission so his family could collect his life insurance. He had falsified his flight hours and was about to be fired, so he figured this was his only option. He brought a hammer and attacked the cockpit crew mid-flight, trying to incapacitate them so he could take control and crash the plane. What happened next is nothing short of heroic. The 3 crew members, despite being severely injured, like skull fractures, bleeding, barely conscious, fought back. They subdued the attacker while simultaneously doing defensive maneuvers with the airplane, pulling up to 5 Gs to keep him off balance. One of the pilots, the flight engineer, left his seat and physically fought the attacker hand-to-hand while the others flew. They managed to land the plane safely, and the hijacker was arrested. All 3 crew members survived, but their injuries were so severe they never flew again. The attacker got multiple life sentences. And this wasn't some external terrorist, this was a company employee, an insider threat. After that, cargo carriers implemented better security protocols, including cockpit cameras in some cases. But it's a reminder that while cargo flying doesn't have passenger-related hijacking risks, it has its own vulnerabilities. One pilot dryly summarized it. A FedEx employee tried to crash a plane so his fam could get his life insurance. It's almost darkly comedic how matter-of-fact that sounds, but the reality is it was a life-or-death struggle at 30,000 feet. The operational reality is really no glamour, just work. So let's bring it back to the day-to-day, because all these big stories and dramatic incidents are outliers. Most of the time, cargo flying is just work, unglamorous work. One experienced FedEx captain, when asked if he missed the glamour of airline flying, literally laughed and said, "Glamour? What glamour would that be?" He had flown passengers earlier in his career and specifically said he didn't miss the hassles of dealing with the FAE's assorted problems, not to mention getting through customs with 17 flight attendants. Cargo pilots bypass all that. They operate out of cargo ramps, often away from the main passenger terminals. They park at remote stands. They clear customs quickly because there's no plane load of passengers to process. They show up to the airplane, do their pre-flight, coordinate with the loadmasters about weight and balance, and launch. After landing, they're often in a van to the hotel faster than passenger crews who have to wait for everyone to deplane. It's streamlined, it's efficient, but it's also pretty solitary. One UK 767 cargo captain described the typical vibe. As soon as we enter Atlantic airspace, it drops to a much gentler pace. Food goes into the oven, headsets go off, and, if we're lucky, we get to watch a display of the aurora. That's the night flying experience in a nutshell. The radios are quiet. The cockpit is dimmed. You're crossing the ocean with your co-pilot, maybe eating a meal from the oven, watching the northern lights dance above you. It's peaceful, almost serene, but it's also lonely. You're awake while the world sleeps. You're in the cockpit for hours with minimal human interaction. Some pilots love that. Others find it isolating. So, during the pandemic, cargo pilots kept flying. And here's something interesting. During the 2019 pandemic, when passenger airlines were grounded and furloughing pilots left and right, cargo pilots were busier than ever. One UK cargo captain said, "Whilst many airline pilots were furloughed or laid off, we were never busier." With passenger airlines grounded, demand for air freight exploded. PPE, vaccines, medical supplies, e-commerce goods, all of it had to be flown, and cargo carriers were the only game in town. Our peak season didn't stop throughout the pandemic, he said. They faced unique challenges, long quarantine periods on international layovers, for example, but they had job security. They were essential workers before essential workers was a widespread term. And actually, this speaks to one of the big selling points of cargo careers: stability. Freight demand can be counter-cyclical to passenger demand. When passenger travel tanks, people order more stuff online, so cargo can actually do well during downturns. There's an old saying, when passenger airlines have turbulence, freight expands, and that stability is huge. It's why many pilots choose cargo. They've seen their friends go through furloughs, bankruptcies, all the chaos that passenger airlines went through in the 2000s and 2010s. FedEx and UPS never furloughed a pilot in their history, not once. One pilot who switched from passenger airlines to cargo said, "I made a vow never to put my family through a painful airline furlough again, which is why I moved to freight." For him, job security was a defining career choice. And honestly, in an industry as volatile as aviation, that kind of stability is worth its weight in gold. The career path: getting in and moving up. So how do you actually become a UPS pilot? And once you're in, how do you move up? Getting hired is the first hurdle. UPS, like any major airline, requires an ATP license, Airline Transport Pilot, which means you need at least 1,500 flight hours. Most people build those hours by flying for regional airlines, doing flight instruction, military flying, or some combination. UPS tends to favor candidates with wide-body and/or international experience, since that's what they operate. But they'll hire from various backgrounds. Military pilots have always been a big pipeline. These days, though, there's a mix. Plenty of civilian pilots from regionals or other airlines. Once you're hired, you start as a first officer on one of the smaller aircraft, probably the 757 or 767, and you might be there for a while. Years potentially, depending on how fast movement is. Eventually, you can bid to upgrade to captain on that same aircraft, or you can bid to move to a different aircraft as a first officer. It all depends on what vacancies open up and where your seniority falls. The goal for a lot of pilots is to eventually make wide-body captain, maybe on the 767 or the 7478. That's the top of the pay scale and the most prestigious position. But here's the thing: some pilots are happy staying as first officers on a bigger aircraft because it pays well and they have less responsibility. Others want the left seat no matter what, so they'll upgrade to captain on a smaller type, even if the pay is similar, just for the satisfaction of being a captain. And some pilots have strong aircraft preferences. They love the 747 and will bid to stay on it as long as they can. Or they hate the MD-11 and can't wait to get off it. There's a lot of personality in these choices. One senior FedEx pilot compared the MD-11 to the 777 and said, "I flew the MD-11 for 4 years and the 777 for 8. No comparison, the 777 is much better." But others love the MD-11 specifically because it's challenging and has character. But overall, career progression is steady. It's not as fast as it was at passenger airlines during their recent hiring boom, but with all those retirements coming, things are going to move. And once you're at UPS, you're probably staying there. It's an endgame job. The pay is too good, the benefits are too good, and there's really nowhere better to go, at least in the cargo world. So, the recent drama: pilots leaving FedEx. Although weirdly, something unprecedented happened recently. In 2022 and 2023, about 100 FedEx pilots quit to go to passenger airlines, which basically never happens. FedEx was supposed to be a career destination. You didn't leave FedEx, but a bunch of pilots did. Why? A few reasons. 1. Stagnant pay. FedEx's last major pay increase was in like 1999, over 20 years ago. Meanwhile, passenger airlines, Delta, United, American, were signing massive new contracts with huge pay raises. So suddenly, passenger airline pilots were making more than FedEx pilots for what many considered an easier job. Daytime flying, no hazardous cargo, etc. 2. Poor management and declining quality of life. Pilots felt FedEx was cutting corners, worsening schedules, not investing in the future. There was frustration and resentment. 3. No seniority movement. If a company isn't growing or hiring much, seniority gets stagnant. Junior pilots stay junior for years. No upgrades, no career progression. That's demoralizing. So when passenger airlines came calling with big paychecks and faster upgrades, some FedEx pilots jumped ship. They were willing to start over at the bottom of a passenger airline seniority list just to get out. That sent shockwaves through the industry. It was a wake-up call that even elite cargo jobs aren't immune to attrition if you don't take care of your people. UPS avoided that problem by staying ahead of it. Their 2023 contract made UPS pilots the best paid in the world, or at least among the best. So there wasn't the same exodus from UPS, but it's a reminder that the game is changing. Pilots have options now, and companies can't take them for granted anymore. So is all this worth it? So here we are. We've covered the schedules, the fatigue, the family challenges, the pay, the culture, all of it. Is it worth it to be a UPS cargo pilot? Honestly, it depends on what you value. If you value stability, high pay, and generous time off, and you can handle working nights and being away from home, then yeah, it's an amazing job. You're set for life financially. You'll never worry about furloughs. You can take months off every year if you plan it right. But if you need a normal schedule, or you struggle with isolation, or you can't handle the fatigue of night flying, then it's going to be really hard. This job will break you. The thing is, most UPS pilots will tell you they don't regret it. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, there are sacrifices, but the trade-offs are worth it. One veteran cargo captain put it like this: "I wasn't sure initially how it would work for me or my family, but it's been a great journey. I've visited places I never thought I would, and seen amazing sights along the way." And really, that's the essence of it. It's not a perfect job. No job is. But it's a job where you get paid incredibly well to fly sophisticated aircraft all over the world. You have job security. You get massive chunks of time off. And, this is the key part, boxes never complain. As cargo pilots love to say, boxes don't complain. And for a lot of people, that one simple fact makes all the other stuff worth it. The bigger picture. But let's zoom out for a second, because there's something kind of profound about what these pilots do that often gets overlooked. When you order something on Amazon and it shows up the next day, you probably don't think about how it got there. But someone flew it, in the middle of the night, while you were sleeping. That package you ordered, maybe it's medicine you need, or a gift for someone's birthday, or just stuff. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It got to you because a UPS pilot flew it from that sorting facility at Worldport in Louisville to a regional hub near you, probably at 2 a.m. They landed at Newark or Ontario or some other airport where another shift of loadmasters and ramp workers unloaded it, sorted it again, and put it on a truck. And that pilot was exhausted. They'd been flying all night. They'd been away from their family for a week. They'd been dealing with fatigue and jet lag and probably eating vending machine food, but they got it there, on time, safely. And they'll do it again tomorrow night, and the night after that. It's not glamorous. No one's clapping when they land. There are no thank you notes from passengers. It's invisible labor, but it's essential. The global supply chain, the thing that makes modern life possible, runs on these overnight cargo flights. Medical supplies, electronics, car parts, food, literally everything moves through this system. And at the center of it all is Worldport, this massive hub in Louisville where millions of packages flow through every single night, getting sorted and redistributed to their destinations. It's this incredibly complex choreography of aircraft arriving and departing in precise windows, loadmasters calculating weight and balance, ramp workers racing against the clock, and pilots launching back into the night sky to deliver those packages across the country and around the world. And UPS pilots are right at the heart of it. They're the ones making sure that system functions. They're coordinating with the shift managers when there's a delay, working with the loadmasters to ensure every aircraft is properly loaded, navigating through weather that would ground less determined operations. They're up there at 35,000 feet, crossing oceans, crossing continents, moving the world's goods while the world sleeps. It's solitary work. It's hard work. It takes a toll. But it's also kind of beautiful in its own way. You're a small part of this massive, interconnected system that spans the entire globe. You're keeping the machine running. One pilot described watching the aurora borealis from the cockpit over the Atlantic and feeling like they were the only aircraft in the sky. That sense of solitude, that quiet moment of beauty in the middle of a workday, surrounded by darkness and stars and the hum of jet engines. That's the cargo pilot life. Not glamorous, not easy, but somehow deeply meaningful. So that's it. That's your life on every UPS cargo flight. You work when everyone else sleeps. You're away when your family needs you. You fight fatigue and loneliness and the weird, unnatural rhythm of a life lived in reverse. You're coordinating with loadmasters and shift managers and dealing with the pressure of tight schedules. You're based out of Louisville or Anchorage or Newark, flying the same routes over and over, becoming intimately familiar with every quirk of your route and every face at your hub. You're packing your own meals in a cooler, hoping the coffee maker works, eating alone in a dimmed cockpit while the world sleeps below. But you're also part of something bigger. You're helping the world function. You're well compensated for it. And you get to spend months at a time off, enjoying the life you've built with the money you've earned doing this hard, strange, essential work. It's not for everyone, but for the people it's for, they wouldn't trade it for anything. Well, except maybe a daytime schedule and weekends that don't involve a hotel room and the ability to fall asleep at a normal hour and a coffee maker that actually works consistently. But other than that, they wouldn't trade it for anything, because at the end of the day, or I guess at the end of the night, they're pilots. They get to fly, and that's what matters. Even if the only passengers are boxes, especially because the only passengers are boxes.